Today. It involves a new technology called Keylonta, which is technology that the EP has used in order to, some of them help us, and the other ones to harm us. And I would like to introduce that material to you today, and also get into a little bit about why they're all here. There's some very interesting things happening in our world that we're very unaware of because we really don't understand the energy dynamics involved with our planet the way that the extraterrestrials do. There are time cycles involved, and I'm going to get a little bit into that. I have a lot of information that I'm going to have to throw at you very quickly because I have about 2 hours to speak. And really, this is information that needs workshop format because there's a lot to cover. So if I lose you, don't feel bad. It's all right. You know, if you're interested in the information, there will be workshop opportunities coming up probably in the next couple of months. So I'm just going to kind of throw it all at you and hope you enjoy it.
Okay.
All righty. I've worked this so much with that. My first little picture here. This was at about age 4 or 5. I lived in a place called Carbondale, Pennsylvania. And I was out in my driveway playing, like a normal little, 4 or 5-year-old would do in the middle of the afternoon. And suddenly I felt something come up behind me. I turned around. First I thought it was a child because it was small. It was no child. It was one of these very strange looking little gray things. And I became terrified instantly. But I couldn't run because it lifted its arm and it did something. It was a little silver rod, and I was frozen. The next thing I found myself was I was spiraling upwards for this large shadow under the clouds, and I thought I was going to die. I thought that was my, I'm dying here, and that's it.
Wow.
I do not remember what happened once I got up there. I remember only laying on a metal floor of some sort, and then fading in and out of consciousness. The next thing I remember, I was falling back down, but not falling quickly, as if something was holding me up and setting me back on the ground. I was set back on the ground, on my feet, from the place, right in the place that I was taken, right in the driveway, and I felt very, very betrayed in general. I mean, you can't trust ETs, you can't trust humans, you can't trust, so I was very, very frightened as a child. And when the children's circles began to happen, I realized it started with a situation when I was playing outside my grandmother's house in broad daylight. And I was playing in these lilac bushes. She had these beautiful lilac bushes that kind of formed a cave, and I used to hide in there, just to play, and I liked to be alone and that kind of stuff. This little being that looked just like the other little gray type beings came up to me, and I was terrified, like, geez, can't you leave me alone in the daytime? This one did not have big black eyes, like most of them do. This one had blue eyes, which was something interesting. I'd never seen a blue-eyed little gray before, and I kind of dubbed them blue eyes. Blue eyes telepath to me. He freeze-framed me too, where I couldn't move. But he said, don't be afraid. You don't have to be afraid any longer. We're going to help you. And he was like, yeah, great. You guys are terrorizing me and you're going to help me. He explained very briefly that they're not all the same. That there are, ones that are here to harm humans, but there are also ones here to help. And you can't tell the difference by looking at them. So he also explained to me that they would be coming for me, and they would try to undo the damage that the other ones were doing, which I didn't even know what damage they were doing. They were doing software damage. They were doing damage to my DNA, and I didn't even know it. All right, so I met my first guardian in the lilac bushes. And after that, I had about twice the amount of abductions happening. It felt once in a while I'd have a month where nothing happened, and that was amazing. That was like, I started to feel like a normal person again, but it wouldn't last long because they would always come back. With the good ones, the ones that were the guardians, they did this other type of thing. They would come in, a couple of them, with little red things that zap through the wall, come in, and they would take me outside. It was kind of neat because they'd do the molecular thing, and I'd find myself standing outside my bedroom in midair with them, and then just kind of going slowly down to the ground. And then they would walk us for a certain way. They didn't bring a ship over the house for some reason, which I never did find out the reason. But it was a different procedure than the other ones used to take me. We would walk for a while, and they would take us to this place, which was not too far. It was about 3 or 4 blocks from my house. It was a wooded area, not real heavy woods, just a little bit. And they would do this thing with the air, and they would make a circle of oscillating energy appear. That was a portal. I didn't know what it was then, but I know what it is now. And they would take me through it, and we'd end up someplace else. And the someplace else, it was a place called Salem Mountain in Carbondale, Pennsylvania. It's on the outskirts, about 5 miles away from where I lived at the time. And we would be put in a field at this mountain. And there, I noticed there was 12 once in a while a little bit more, but most of the time 12 children. And they would have us sitting in a circle. There were these wolf things. They looked like blackish colored wolf dogs or something. They sat there, and you knew they weren't wolves because they looked at you with this intelligence level that was frightening. And they kind of kept guard, and we'd all just kind of sit there. A lot of us were scared until we got used to it. And we did get used to it because they took us repeatedly, and they would take us aboard this ship. I love this because they were worried. Now, this is the difference between the good guys and the bad guys. The good ones were worried that if the children saw a spaceship coming down to get them, they would be terrified. So when there were newcomers in the group, they would do what's called a holographic insert. They were able to make the spacecraft look like a mountain. It looked like something right out of a fairy book. That all of a sudden was there in the air. This pristine mountain looked like a regular piece of rock with a cave in it, except it had this blue glow underneath it, and that's where all this stuff is here. And then one of them, her name was Amira. She was the one that always came to get us. She was a taller guy. She was about 5 foot tall. And she had blue eyes also. And I got very close to her. And she had a mind that, would make Einstein look very, very mediocre. She was brilliant. And she was also loving. And people say that the Greys don't have the capacity to love. Yes, they do, when they're not connected to something called the Zeta Collective Mind Complex. It's a biocomputer that controls them. The ones that have been freed from that are able to experience some level of emotion toward other beings. And these beings were very, very good to me. They taught me things that I'm very grateful for at this point, but it's very hard sometimes to explain to other people. They taught me how to play with energy balls and how to make them with the energy that comes out of my palms. They taught me how to, on their ships I can do it. They said my genetic code can't do it yet here in this level of density, but they taught me how to shift my vibrational frequency and go through solid objects. These are the things they're training people in. First, they'll train you in like astral states. Then sometimes they will start to train you. If you have a genetic code and you can tolerate that kind of flexibility, they will teach you how to do these things physically. This is the potential that the human body has, and we don't even know it, but they know. And the Guardians are going to help us develop it. Another experience I had with the Guardians, another place that they took me to. What's that word? Yes, it's called the Keylonta Training. And this is a fascinating, fascinating procedure. It was a very long table, as you can see. These little oval things here looked like, sort of like what our computer screens are made out of, but they were kind of like dome-shaped, and they were inlaid right into the table. On those little domes, symbols would flash, little tiny symbols that would look like, doodles or something in childhood thought, but they were made out of light. They were like light symbols coming up through this screen. And sometimes the screen would be dark in the back, sometimes it would be a white background with these little colored light symbols coming up on it. Well, they put an apparatus on the head, and that did something electrically. It would vibrationally let you know. You get like a buzz feeling if your spine wasn't aligned right, because it's important to keep your spine aligned right in order for the energy to move through your fingers to get to your brain, translate. They taught me how to read these symbols, which was fascinating, with the fingertips. Eyes closed or open, didn't matter. You didn't have to look at the symbols. And when you would get it right, and the current was right, it would open up like a movie in your head. Talk about quick learning. You could absorb textbooks this way. It's a fascinating language. That's one of the applications of Keylontic technology. That's Keylontic communication, formerly. All right, so we spent a number of years playing games like this when I went with the Guardians at night. And I was still being taken by the negative ones. And it was almost like a power struggle between where the negative ones, at this point, by the time they were training me to Keylonta, the other guys, they were training me how I could block what they were trying to do. So they were making an extra effort to try to get me under their mind control type thing. And it didn't work. Okay. Now, in 1974, this occurred. This is interesting. This occurred 2 blocks away from my house, okay? Tom won't be able to read the article, but you can see the headline, okay? This is very interesting. There was Salem Mountain featured again also. This was a mass sighting of something that went down. It was, Salem Mountain was about 5 miles outside of Carbondale, Pennsylvania. There were about 9 reports called into the police that some huge, unidentified flying, fiery-looking thing went flying over Salem Mountain. Okay? About 5 or 10 minutes later, there was a whole bunch of phone calls that something big and fiery and strange just landed in a silt pond, okay? A silt pond is where they used to clean the coal and everything. It's an old coal mining town. That silt pond was 2 blocks away from my house. Well, there was enough calls where the police went back to see what it was. When they got back there, now this was, I forget, it was like 7 p.m. It was after dark by the time they got back there. What they saw was a glowing object under the water of the pond. And they didn't know what in the world to do with it. All right, they were like, this is new to us. What they were thinking, use a flashlight or is this, that? They didn't know. One of the officers tried to shoot at it to see if that would change things, but that didn't move the that at all. So they called in the Civil Air Patrol. They called in several UFO agencies. I know one of them was from Philadelphia and one was from New York State. And by morning, they had the whole place roped off. The public wasn't allowed to go back there, all that kind of stuff. Now, there was enough people that saw this thing streaking across Salem Mountain, and there was nothing that saw it go in the pond. That actually, that obviously something had gone streaking across, landing in the pond. Well, by Monday morning, this was Friday when this happened, by Monday morning, the story was, some kids threw an old coal miner's lantern or an old railroad lantern, those old lanterns that, that they use, I guess, in the lighthouses or something, into the water, and it glowed for 9 hours underwater. Right? 9 hours. They had 8mm film, I believe it was, taken of this. They had still shots taken of this. The UFO investigator people had shots of this. The police refused to release the film, and I have a statement here someplace. I'll show you that in a minute. There's a statement from one of the investigators, one of the UFO investigators, that they were coerced into saying what they did in the public interview, and they were threatened that they would never be allowed, back in or given any information at all if they didn't say what they were told to say. Now, here's where we identified it as a 6-volt railroad lantern. Yeah, right. Even as a child, I think this must have been Hercules to whip this thing 5 miles across Salem Mountain and into the pond, They really think we're stupid out there. And frighteningly, a lot of the people didn't question it. Okay, it was a hoax, some kid threw a thing in. All the accounts were in the paper, but they still didn't do anything about it. Okay. Witnesses stick to their story because they're trying to debunk the witnesses, saying they're lying. But witnesses stick to it. But they labeled it a hoax, and the UFO experts still have their doubts about it. They don't believe it's a hoax, but they're not getting anywhere with the local government people. And the last thing on this case was, 20 years later, it still raises questions. It's unsolved. They know something went down there. There was a truck seen taking, an unmarked truck, a large brown unmarked truck, seen taking something away from it. At one point, I believe it was Saturday night and Sunday, during that weekend, they had kicked the press out, where the press could no longer be back in the area. The press and the public were removed from the premises. So, it was very obvious. I mean, when you know what's going on with other places, that this fits into the category of government cover-up. All right. And I thought it was interesting that I was having abductions for when I was 74, for maybe 5 years before that. This was confirmation for me. It's like, geez, they are here. Something just went down here. And I was later told that it was actually part of it wasn't a manned craft that went down, what the Guardians had told me. They told me it was, what do they call them? They're kind of like, not exactly spy satellites, but they're monitors. And they have a lot of these in the atmosphere. And they're close. They don't appear on radar or anything because they can do the frequency blend of between D3 and D4. They're used just to monitor us, especially in portal regions. The Earth has vortexes, portal areas that are very, very valuable to both Guardians and intruders. So they keep an eye on these things with these unmanned craft. What had gone down was a piece of the unmanned craft. What was kind of interesting with the story was after the sighting came out, for about a month, there had been numerous sightings of all sorts of different things flying around. People having things hovering over their cornfield that was interrupting their TV reception. There was probably over 100 phone calls on, before this crash event happened. The Guardians had told me that was because they knew this thing was going down, and they wanted it, and it wasn't theirs. It was one of the intruder ones. But they wanted to get its pieces before anybody found it. And, so that's why the Guardians said the other sightings had occurred before this. They knew that the thing was going down. They wanted to find the location where it was going down and hopefully intercept it before it became news down here. But they didn't get that piece of it. So that was the story that the Guardian explained as far as what was really taking place during this, mass UFO sighting. Another thing, very quickly, when I was about 12 years old, I had a very strange abduction. It was very strange at this point because it didn't involve aliens, which I found very, very weird. I was used to aliens at this point, not that I liked them, but I was used to them. I was vacationing with my father, and it was over, I believe it was over the Christmas, New Year's holiday. We were in a place called Elk Mountain, Pennsylvania, and it's a ski resort area, kind of like out in the boonies, and we had a little farmhouse that, he and some friends had been renting, the kids were up, and the grown-ups had gone out and left us with a babysitter. They were going, I think it was New Year's Eve, they were doing a New Year's thing. Well, it was probably around midnight. I think it was around midnight. It was very dark out, and it was after bedtime. We'd been put to bed, and I heard a strange sound outside. I heard a humming sound. And this really piqued my curiosity because I didn't hear a lot of humming sounds. Some of the ships, once in a while, I'd hear humming sounds, but it wasn't a consistent thing every time. So I was like, okay, what's happening out there? And then I saw lights, and I thought it was first lights driving, from a car driving by on the road or something. And I looked out, and no cars. And I thought maybe my parents had come home, nobody's there. And I still was hearing this hum. So I was at a window over here. I didn't know that at a window over here, there was a big triangle-shaped thing. Okay, hovering over the little field that was outside of the house. I had something very, very strange came over me, and I still don't, to this day, I still don't know why I did it. Instead of freaking out and going running for the babysitter, I kept going downstairs. I wanted to see what was happening. And this is it's still very uncharacteristic because I was afraid most of the time, and I wonder if somebody put me up to that or what. But I tiptoed downstairs, and I put my neck down and opened the door to see what's going on out there. At this point, I see a little bit of light coming from above, and it was coming from up high, not where the windows would illuminate. Plus, there was no lights on in the house, so it wasn't from inside, glow coming outside. I walked out onto the porch, and as soon as I got out there, I got grabbed from behind, and something was stuffed over my face, and I lost consciousness. And when I woke up, I was in a very strange place. It looked like a hospital. And there were people dressed in white, like white-type hospital suits, kind of like the blue things, but they were white instead of blue. Most of them had the little masks on, and they had their hair covered a little bit. But they were humans. There was no aliens here. I was in a bed, and I was strapped down. And when I woke up, it was like, where am I? I started to scream. So two of them came in, and one of them, I don't know, he was a male, I guess he was some type of doctor or whatever, was trying to calm me down and saying, where am I? How did I get here? Who are you? What is happening here? And I saw a needle and a little vial of something over on the bedside table. And it just was like telepathy. He was thinking it, I saw him think it, and I knew he was going for me, so I started to flail and, try to get away. And another two of them came in and flattened me down totally. I was already tied down. And they jabbed me with the needle somewhere in my arm, and I was gone again, unconscious. Woke up here, which looked like could have been somebody's basement. It was just either puttiest green or dark gray walls, and kind of like those utility lamps, nothing fancy, it's over my head. And this gentleman was mean. I don't know who he was, but he was one mean SOB. He was screaming at me. He was yelling at me. And I was so drugged by whatever they gave me, I didn't even know what he was asking. It was all swirling in my head. I was trying to keep my head up. And then this gentleman over here is trying to be nice to me. So I guess they're playing good guy, bad guy, good cop, bad cop, or whatever. And they were obviously looking for some information. But I was clueless as to what information they wanted from me. And they had me so strung out on whatever they gave me that I couldn't answer them if I tried. Then I lost consciousness. After this point, I lost consciousness again. Next thing I remember on that one was stumbling, somebody dragging me into a black car. It looked like a bigger car. I wouldn't say it was a limousine, but it was bigger than an average car. It had dark windows. And they threw me in head first. And then I lost consciousness again. I woke up laying in the field with snow, right outside of the farmhouse. And I was frozen. And I remember laying there and watching the snow crystals in my eyelashes. I must have been there for a while because they were kind of stuck together and frozen. And at first I was, I'm dying now. I'm going to freeze to death. Whatever just happened, I'm going to freeze to death. And I got to my feet and I managed to, I was still functional and I didn't have frostbite or anything, so maybe it wasn't that long. I was very confused. It was a very strange night. I looked up and over in the distance a little bit, I saw the triangle again. And all I can say with these ships is from the bottom, they just look like a black triangle. I don't know what they look like from the top or dimensionally, but they give this appearance of a black, like, shadow triangle. And I saw the thing again, and it was like memory came back, and I was terrified, and I went running for, to get into the house. I was terrified.
Do you think they were government?
Yes, I do. Not general government. All right, the government is involved in this, but not your average government personnel. They don't have the clearance for that. There's a small group that started out of MJ-12. That is true. The Guardians, told me that. They said, this is true. You're MJ-12. It's not somebody's conspiracy theory that they made up. And this group has grown since that time, and they've been actively involved with this extraterrestrial presence. They call them the EBs. What they are is a certain strain of gray hybrid. They're a cross between grays and dracons. But I'm not going to get into who's who in this one, or I'll never have time to cover the important information. Okay, and if there's anybody interested, I will give, like workshops or something on who's who and how to tell the difference between them and that kind of stuff, because they are here. But, at this point, there's a lot of people coming out and talking like me that have had these experiences, so they're here. Anyway, I did survive this. When I asked the Guardians much later, many years later, what in the world happened there, they said that they were trying to, it's a project, it's called Project 014, and it's a mind control project, that they're actually staging abductions, making them look like alien abductions, and they're taking certain humans that have particular interesting genetic configurations that they want. And they are trying to, they're experimenting on them. They're trying to see if they can create a form of mind control that can be used on the general populace. So they're using certain ones, and they're also interested. They know how to read what's called cellular memory, okay? Your cells store memory, not just your brain. And it not just stores memory of here, it stores the memory of your genetic lineage. They can derive tremendous information by hooking you up to certain computers that have the ability to take the electronic signals that are running through your DNA and turn them into pictures and words and such on their computers. And this was part of that project. I didn't know about it then. And it's something that they told me in the last 3 years they told me about was taking place. So we not only have aliens abducting humans, we have the government abducting humans and pretending they're aliens. All right, we're in the middle of a very big scenario. Okay. Now, after that, because of some of the damage that was done to my genetic code, the Guardians decided, because the intruders would not leave me alone. They were still trying to get me. I knew too much at this point, and if they had to kill me, that would be fine. The Guardians decided to play with my genetic code too. If they took certain codes out that the intruders were after, because there's certain things that the intruders are looking for in their genetic strains, it's called the silicate matrix. And many of us have portions of it, some of us have most of it. They want the silicate matrix. What the Guardians did to try to make me look less desirable to the intruders was they removed certain portions of the genetic code that contain the silicate matrix. So now I was just like, anybody else, and there's a lot of us. Many in this room may have the silicate matrix, so I'm not saying my genes are better than yours. It's not like that. We all have a heritage of this. But because they removed these certain genes, they weren't able to take me through, the Guardians weren't able to take me through the transports. They would do portals a lot. Okay, what I call do portals, that's where instead of having a ship hanging over your house and taking you directly up into the ship, they will do this thing and manifest a portal and take you through. You have to have a certain, what they call resonance rate of your genetic code to be able to tolerate portal transit or you incinerate upon entry. And this has happened to some humans. Spontaneous combustion usually involves something like that. So after this, for a while, the Guardians couldn't take me physically, and neither could the other guys, which was kind of nice. The negative ones stopped to a degree. There were still sometimes, they did some other things during my teens to, try to get me back under their control. But they would take me, the Guardians started this procedure, they would take me astrally. That's when I learned about astral abductions. It scared the heck out of me to watch myself being ripped into two pieces and one could float and the other couldn't. This was all new to me. But I learned about it, and I learned that astral experiences are not just something aliens can, give to you. It's a potential that we have. Once we learn how to do it, we can do this with ourselves. We can learn to separate our consciousness. This gets into the technology that involves what they call particle grids, which we'll talk about a little later. All right, so they started these, and they took me places in the astral, and they trained me in certain other things. They taught me a lot about history and their version of what human history is. And boy, it's different than ours. And sometime I'll get into that, but I don't have time tonight. So, then my life would be, Guardians continued. The intruders left me alone pretty much. After about age 13 or 14, it wasn't too bad. Then, in 1988, I had this encounter. This was a physical encounter that scared the heck out of me. This thing was like the biggest bug I'd ever seen. I'd never met them when I was in the earlier abductions. I had met the little grays and a couple other different types, but never did I see a 12-foot tall praying mantis. Okay, that was not. I didn't even know what a regular praying mantis looked like, but I was terrified. It was very interesting. I was sitting in the hall playing my guitar, and it was probably, I think it's around 4 in the afternoon, something like that, and I got this really weird feeling in the air, and then right around the corner, this big ball of light, it just came zipping around the corner, and then it stopped. And, whoa, time to get up and leave. Before I could do that, I was freeze-framed, and it's like, oh, you guys again. And the ball opened up, and it turned into what looks like a portal. One of the big, but this one was white. Sometimes they're different colors. This one was white. Out of this, first standing in it, but I could always see it from about here, was this thing. It had these wonderfully flowing appendages on it, and these huge eyes, and they were black eyes, and it was like a very light gray to white color. And it was just looking at me. And I felt it scanned me. I felt it just knew everything in my whole existence instantly by doing the scanning thing with its consciousness. And then these legs stepped out. It was like watching something on a very silly science fiction show, where these little animated legs step out of this portal. And I'm still frozen, can't scream, can't do anything. And it came over to me, and it was reaching for me. And I lost consciousness. I woke up about 8 hours later. Missing time? Yes. About 8 hours worth, I think. I wasn't exactly sure what time we left, but it was very, very late in the morning, I think it was like 3 or 4 in the morning when I finally got back. And I was in bed. And my clothes were on, but part of them were not buttoned the way they had been. My guitar was now inside the room. I was sitting outside of my room. It was a rooming house at that point. And we were all nicely tucked into our room, and I had no memory of what had happened except I remembered the face. At some point, I wrote it down. All right, I wrote, thing, and I drew a quick picture of it. I'm an artist, so I made a real quick sketch of this mantis thing. And then, the next day, I was slightly something strange happened. Don't know what it is. Leave that. Well, I didn't find out what happened until I believe it was 92, 91 or 92. There's 91. Okay. In 1991, we had a very interesting experience. I worked as an assistant manager in a movie theater, okay? And I had, several younger staff underneath me, usually, they're like teenagers, some of them are a little bit older, but, the snack bar helping and that kind of thing. And in this movie theater, it was an old movie theater, had history to it, a very old building. Well, there started to be rumors the place is haunted. People are seeing stuff upstairs, the staff are seeing things upstairs. They're seeing flying balls of light and such things, and they're scared. The kids won't go up to clean. I have to go up with them and stand there and babysit while they're sweeping up the popcorn and stuff. And finally, this girl, she's a good friend of mine. Her name is Jennifer. She was going up the steps, just getting up her gumption. She was very, very frightened because she'd seen things flying around up there, and she didn't know what it was. She thought it was a ghost. We all thought it was haunted, haunted theater type thing. Well, she saw this big egg shape of light appear on the steps going up into the auditorium. Terrified her, and she came running to me. I was at the snack bar, and I came running over there. What did you see? Where was it? She didn't have to answer me because I could still see the air doing one of these type things. And I went over to it, and I felt it, and there were both hot spots and cold spots. So thinking, paranormal activity here. We need unsolved mysteries. We need somebody, come in and wire this room, please. So we decided, well, to get into unsolved mysteries interested in this haunting case or whatever it is, we need more evidence. We need to catch something on film or something like that. So a number of us, 3 or 4 of us, would go up after the theater was closed and we cleaned up and did our jobs. I had the keys, so we would go up and we'd sit up in the auditorium with the lights out. I thought an eerie experience. This is one of those multi-tiered old-fashioned theaters with the big balconies and everything, very eerie space. And we'd start to see little light activity. Sometimes there'd be a light show on the screen, but there was no projector running. and no lights on in the place. So it was like getting interesting. Something was there. And we were half scared, but half dying of curiosity and half wanting to get somebody to come in here and wire it and give them enough evidence to, make it worth their while. So the final time we went up, it was the last time because I decided somebody's going to get hurt and I'm not going to do this anymore. We were all right, this is Jennifer. Yeah, Jennifer, and this is my cousin Eric and myself. We were up there. So, okay, is there anything going to happen? All of a sudden, out of nowhere, these 3 balls of light, about this big. One of them was about that big. A couple of them were a bit small, like basketball size. They were like orangish and pinkish, came flying in a V formation over the top of the theater. And the theater went like all the way over here. They came flying across over here, low altitude. Came over here. Jennifer and me are in the middle of trying to get up. It's like, oh God, something's happening. Because they're coming right at us. And all I remembered was this big flash of white. And I have no idea where my mind went, or my body for that matter. Later, Jennifer told me, I didn't know purple all over you, and then I don't remember anything else that happened. She saw purple energy moving all over me, I guess. Eric was the first thing I noticed when I came back. He was in a trance, and he was not a trance person. He wasn't into metaphysics or anything like that. He was sitting on the steps, totally like spaced out. Trying to wake him up or get him out of it. He wouldn't snap out of it. I was terrified. Oh my God, I'm going to get arrested here for bringing these kids up here and something happened. I'm the adult here. I'm in trouble. Finally, he kind of, came up a little. He says, they're talking to me. They're telling me, who's telling you what? And I think, I don't know. And later, he was saying, I don't know who they were. But they were communicating things to me. They were talking to me about spiritual stuff, I think. I don't know what that was. And after this, his hands got, did you ever see the little corpuscles and stuff in your hands when you get like really cold? It gets like this bluish mottled type look. His hands were all blue, and it lasted about 3 or 4 hours. We kept checking on them. Yeah, your hands okay? Okay. Finally, they were all right. We had no negative effects from feedback. But we knew something weird was up. We didn't go back to the theater. So we decided to do some experiments at home. And somebody suggested, try a Ouija board. If it's a haunting, maybe you can get a ghost. So I was like, all right, we'll try a Ouija board. Does anyone know how to use this thing? Well, as soon as we started, we got some letters called out. And it's spelled Tagarhat. What the heck is that? And it was insistent. They kept going back to it. So we're like, all right, whose subconscious mind is this? I don't know. So it was like, all right, if you're somebody there, are you a ghost? And it went to no real fast. If you're not a ghost. And then I got in my head, and my mother got it. She was playing this game with us too. She got the same time as, I'm very spiritual, but I'm no ghost. And she looked at me, and I looked at her like, did you hear that? I heard that too. And then she said, well, if you're not a ghost, what are you? We're humoring it at this point, not knowing what in the world's happening. Are we communicating with our subconscious or what? And it kept going, E.T., 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 E.T. And we're looking at each other like, we didn't put it together. With all the experiences that I've had, I didn't get it. It was like this delayed assembly process in the mind where you have the memories. They're all in little pieces, but they hold plugs, so you can't put them all together to make a rational connection. It would have been very rational if we thought about it. But of course, they can communicate this way, they can do the other stuff. Why not? Well, it flashed a picture of itself in our minds. My mother got it, Jennifer got it, and I got it at the same time, of this big white mantis face with big black eyes. And I kind of, jolted when I saw it. And I partially remember seeing it before, and I said, you don't believe I'm real. I said, go look in your journals for 1988. Okay. I can't remember writing the account down. When I wrote it down after I'd gotten back after meeting the mantis, I went to enter my journals, because I used to keep journals all the time. As a writer, I like poetry and all, so the journals was there. I found it, and it freaked me out. Energy fields that are surrounding your body, and it gets online with your neurological structure, electrically speaking. And whenever I was where I had time to do it, I would feel the energy deck. It was like a buzzy electrical sensation. It was a very strange sensation. I would sit down and say, okay, what is this? And they had taught me during some of the encounters, lean into it and it will open. It's like an email file. You open the thing by moving your consciousness into it, and data runs. For a while, I was getting it in dreams. I'd wake up and I'd have text scrolling down my face. It was like very strange, in front of my house. What is this? So we learned to communicate with each other, or they taught me how to communicate, or at least receive the communications in this way. And they would back it up with physical encounters. They would back it up with these strange astral encounters. So it was across the board when they said they were communicating and believed them at that point. I had a very strange experience in 1995. This was one of the harder ones. They told me that I was going to have a child. I said, well, no, I had 3. I was already, I'd married and I'd divorced and I had 3 children. I don't want any more children. And they said, don't worry about it. I'm like, no way. They told me that I would conceive. And that was just I guess there's a 1% possibility for methods of birth control that you can. Either the 1% worked for me or they did something because I ended up conceiving a child. So I mentally prepared myself and okay, we have to deal with this. We're going to have this child. Thought never entered my mind at the time that it wasn't one of ours. I just didn't put 2 and 2 together again, which is I'm very guilty of this all through this thing, and I think they have something to do with it. That my first thing was, hey, I should have, do they do this? Do they have something to do with this baby? They told me I was going to have, it was going to happen. But I said, okay, I'll have the child. They told me I have to have the child. They told me I really should have the child. It would be a bad thing for me if I didn't have the child. Not that they were threatening me, but they had to do with spiritual purposes. And the whole thing was all right. Well, finally got my brain plugged up to having the child. And right around the 3rd month, I had a very strange night. One evening, very strange. Lots of astral experiences. I felt things in the room with me. I saw lights flying around my room. And then I have a lot of memory of it. The next day at work, and I had a desk job, so it wasn't strenuous work, I started to bleed. And for a week, I'm calling my doctor, and he's saying, well, do bed rest. It can't be that. I didn't realize how bad it was, and I'd never had anything happen like that. The pregnancy before. But I ended up supposedly losing the baby. They went in to do a D&C to make sure there was nothing in it that would, toxify my system once they had that diagnosis, I guess, of miscarriage. And there was no fetus in it. It was gone. And later, about 2 months later, it was about 2 weeks later, the first time, they took me, one of the female, Mira, in fact, that little red taller girl, she came into my room in that ghosty form, and she said, come with me, I need to show you something. And she took my hand and she pulled me through another one of those portal things. And we were standing on a ship someplace in a blue lit area with all these little, I guess they're glass and nets, but they remind you of crystals. They were kind of like crystals. They're funny shape and they open, but they haven't closed. And in that thing, there's this withered looking little gray thing. And it had a black thing over its face. It looked sick. Whatever it was, it looked, immediately I knew what it was. I knew that was the child, but it was no longer, in me. I didn't realize they meant I was having one of their babies, but I did. And I was going to have to, pay for raising it here. But it was very, very traumatic for me at the time. I was grateful for it later. But I saw the little thing laying in there, and it had 4 fingers, actually. It had human features on its face, but its head was very, very distorted. It had a very strange-looking head. And I went to the UFO conference. He said, do you want to move down with me? And I said, well, I know you for about a month. If it's a nice area, yeah, because I didn't like where I was living, so I ended up moving down here. And that was in August. In October, I met this being. It did the ghost thing, came in through the wall, half solid, and sat in my living room. I had a gentleman visiting me at that point. His name was Harold Eglin. He came down from the space group in New York City because I'd asked him to come down. I had been seeing these very strange, about this big, flying boomerangs. I call them flying shapes. I didn't know what the heck they were. They looked like transparent boomerangs, but with dimensionality. And he was zipping around outside my house every once in a while. So I called him and I said, I had met Harold at an earlier conference. And, I know you investigate this stuff. Do you ever hear flying shapes? Want to come down and see mine? Please tell me what this is, because I don't know whose these are, if they're good guys, bad guys, or what they are. So he came down, and of course the flying shapes didn't care. But this one, his name is Dralov. He introduced himself as representative of the Sirienne-Arcturienne Coalition for Interplanetary Defense. That was quite a handle. Usually they didn't do that. Usually they didn't give you military titles. Well, he stayed hanging around in a semi-solid form Harold couldn't see him, but he could feel it. And I said, Harold, do you feel something in the room? Because I was seeing it. I said, yeah. Where is Harold? Right over there. Yeah. The thing is sitting in a chair with his legs crossed, kind of like, you know, knowing that this was very funny. I mean, it thought it was funny. It knew that he couldn't see, I could see, because they'd done things to my eyes in earlier experiences. They had done some kind of work on my eyes. They said it was activating the rods or something. And I can see a little bit higher frequency than before they did that too. But they didn't take us out the open door this time. They didn't take us through the wall. Went around the yard, and on our way out, we saw a group of people and a small ship with light coming down, and a group of humans standing under the light. And one of them's waving, going, Harold! And I'm like, and I noticed the person. So I think it was Whitley Strieber. And we told Whitley about it. I mean, after the thing, this is published in the article and the whole bit. And Whitley said, yeah, he did have a very weird experience that night. He doesn't know what it was, but it's very possible that was him. And, so he even, concurred with it. It could have been, because he had some weird stuff that he even told his wife about. He had such a weird encounter the night before. So they took us up on a different ship, went around the backyard, and there was this blue beam with a larger ship up above it. And we went up into that, and that's kind of neat. Some of the blue beams, they'll make it vibrate real fast, and you kind of turn into light and disappear for a second, and then they remanifest on the other side. It's kind of like Beam Me Up Scotty, but faster. Okay, it doesn't take as long, not that it'll beam me up Wednesday. Well, here's where we ended up. Okay, this is a mothership. This is called Ashalum. That's their name. Okay. This is what Ashalum looks like when it's folded up. Okay. This is what it looks like when it's stationed. And these are long rods. They look like glass rods filled with light. All of these. And they said they're part of what's called a photon condenser generator. Is what powers the ship. And these rods help stabilize it when it's parked, basically. This is parked interdimensionally between D3 and D4, and the frequency bands of the higher D3 and the lower D4. We were taken on to this craft. Harold and I and my daughter. My daughter actually was left on the smaller ship. They said she couldn't make the transmutation. Her gene code didn't resonate high enough yet to make the complete transmutation. So they took her, and they said she's all right. She's in the education center. Then they took us to this place. It's an auditorium. It's huge. This is us down here. More people down here. And over on the other side, I saw Whitley in his group, which was interesting. There he is again. And I've seen him at several encounters. I don't know if he knows me. We haven't met each other face to face yet. That would be interesting to see if he'll come to that. You can use my little cheat sheet here so I don't get off, because there's a lot of data on these, and I'm not expecting everybody to absorb that. I'm not covering all the data on these diagrams. I'm just using the diagrams to show you some basic information. Now, these ideas, these concepts, are things that have been given to me through my encounters with the Guardian Alliance, which is a large group of extraterrestrials that work with metaterrestrials. Metaterrestrials are beyond human form. They've evolved out of biology, and I'll show you a little bit about what that means. All right. Our reality takes place in something called a 15-dimensional matrix, okay? We don't just have one dimension, 1, 2, 3, not even 4. There are 15 of them. This is one 15-dimensional matrix. Our Earth and everything on it, and our galaxies right now, part of them, are all in this third-dimensional field, okay? We're going to look at the numbers here first. It goes 1, 2, 3, then 4, 5, 6, then 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Okay, we're going to stay on the column on the left here. That is the progression of 15 dimensions that a being or a planet or any one of us goes through as it evolves. It evolves genetically and it evolves consciousness-wise. And the two are intertwined. Okay, so we've evolved up through these frequencies. These are all frequencies. The dimensional bands are composed of frequency. All right, we are here. Our next journey after we finish passing through the frequency bands of the third dimension would be into the fourth. I won't get into why it flips. It would be easier to just write it, 1 through 15 out, but there's actually a flip in the center. But that's not important for our discussion. So we're right here. Our Earth is next, would be evolving into the D4 frequency bands. All right, we're not scheduled to do that for another 2,000 years. We have a time cycle to complete, okay? All through these things, there are cycles of time, and the cycles run in a spiraling form. And I'll show you on this one. Okay. This again is 15-dimensional matrix. Alright. Okay. There are 6 primary spirals. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. These would represent parallel universes taking place in the same 15-dimensional matrix. Okay, these would also. We're in this time spiral over here. We spiral up through the dimensional bands. Our planet does. Okay, spirals up through. We're right here now. We would normally finish our spiral and then pick up the spiral up here in D4 and continue our progression. This is a progression of evolution of planets and people. All right, we evolve from the lower densities of matter, where there's more matter and less light within our bodies, into higher versions of matter that are less dense because there's more light compared to the amount of dense matter particles. All right, so we are evolving through this. Just want to show you what the time spirals look like, so you have an idea of what's
You
coming
could do
next.
2 hours just on that one slide.
What?
You could do 2 hours on that one slide.
I know. I mean,
I mean,
these
you're
are
rushing
so-
too fast.
I have to go fast through them just to get to the end of the discussion, because that is really more important than going into the details right now. I will offer workshops or other lectures for people who want me to detail this stuff. And I'm sure the scientist guys will want that. I already have quite a few of them interested. Okay, now, we are in the middle of a path of progression, all right, up the dimensional scale. This is normal. This is what we're all involved with, whether we know it or not. Okay, now, on to this one. In our time spiral, all right, if we were going to evolve in our normal path, all right, we already came up through here, we came up through here. Each one of these is like a time continuum, okay? So you got 4 time continuums in one part of a dimensional time spiral. We've evolved up to here right now. These are all frequency bands, okay? You can see the, UHF. They're designated frequency bands. These are frequency bands in the 3rd dimension, which we are passing through now, evolving through. Our planet is over here, all right? Our normal path of progression would be coming from here, and this is where we were about December of 1997. We would be coming up here May of 2012. We would be about here. And then by 2017, we would be over here, okay? This is the center point in the cycle. There are 2 of them in every cycle. What happens here is our Earth is not alone. It has a double. It has a twin, okay? You can call it the antiparticle, but it's more complicated than that. So let's just call it a double, all right? At certain points in the cycles, the double is coming down this cycle. We're cycling up here. They pass through each other. Now, 2 planets don't go bang and collide and explode. That's not what happens. Their electromagnetic energy fields of both planets pass through each other. All right. Now, as long as the vibrational rates between the 2 are not too far apart, you won't have pole shifts. You won't have any problems. But if there is if there's a vibrational difference that's too big, if one vibrates too low compared to the other one, if one's too low a frequency compared to the other one, there will be a transition period which can cause pole reversal and this kind of things. That's not going to happen this time, but it has happened a couple of times in the past. But anyway, we're coming up in 2017. In our normal path of progression, we would move through this energy field of our double, all right? And then we would go along normally if we didn't have any pole disruptions, any magnetic grid disruptions. We would continue on our path over to here, and then we would be ready to make the leap up into the next time cycle. That would be our normal path of progression. It wouldn't happen for another 2,000 years before we started that upward climb. But there's a problem. Right over here, the year 2976 falls, okay? In 2976, in this time continuum that we're in, there is a probable Earth version that goes with this time continuum. The Earth explodes in that version because of things that were being done by the intruder, ET forces, and the interior government. We're gone if we stay in this time continuum. And that's what it comes down to. This is not going to be allowed to happen. Because if our planet explodes, it affects everything in our galaxy, in our local galaxy. It affects the Pleiades, it affects the Sirians, it affects all the other beings that are out there. So they've done something to change this outcome.
Katie, that's a piece of work.
You're taking a lot of vitamins, bro.
All right, you here?
Yeah.
Katie, the more specific
What do you
you are,
think
the
of
more
that?
you seem to be going against your own evolution.
I thought.
Because when the evolution is real specific, we normally call it creation.
Physicists.
I'm not gonna get into that right now, because I won't get done with
Yeah, I
the
know.
discussion, but hopefully we'll have time for questions and answers at the
I
end.
know.
Okay, to make this a little simpler, if you can look at the one time continuum that we're in right now, okay? This is our double, all right? It would be moving this way while we're moving this way. Now, in a time cycle, our double moves at twice the speed counterclockwise, and we, as a magnetic planet, move at half the speed of the double clockwise. If you trace that motion at 3 different points, they cross through each other. They're called fission fusion points, because what happens is that the particles fuse, the energy grids of the double and planet fuse, and they enter hyperspace so fast that we don't even see it, and then they come back and replicate and create fission, and then they replicate back into themselves, and actually make a few more versions, but I won't go into that either. So there's a couple of F points, fission fusion points. This is where we are approaching in 2017. That's where those two particles intersect with each other. If we were to do the normal procedure here and evolve in the normal path, we would continue our time continuum until we got down here, at which point another one of these would occur with a higher time continuum. All right, so it won't be exactly like this. It would be involving 3 or 4 of these circles rather than just one. We're not going to make it into that time, because the only other F point, here's an F point that we're approaching, at F points is the only time when a planet can leave its present time continuum. So there are 3 points that it can actually shift into a different time continuum. This is one, and this is one. That implosion happens before the next time.
For the third.
So we are here. This is the only opportunity that anybody out there that wants to save our species, I mean, we may have to worry about it. We're going to be dead, gone, reincarnated or something by then, right? But if you care about the species, like a lot of the ETs do, they have to do something about this. Because if we stay in this time continuum and we pass through here, we're going to hit that future. We won't be able to shift out of it at that point. There are certain points where you can shift futures and align yourself with a different future, and your decision, we're not
So
predestined.
we'll be moved, we just won't be on that track.
Right. We're moving train tracks. Okay, now I'll show you what the option is, what we're going to be doing. Here's another one of those, so many people cross-eyed, I just did when I was making it. Okay. Now, put this one back on for 2 seconds to remind you where you were. Okay, remember we were here, right? That's the normal path of progression. Would have been going up here and coming back around this way, right? Well,
Can you put them side by side, Katie?
I don't know if they'll fit.
Yeah, we could do it.
Let me put this one on first, I'm not going side by
I
side.
can do the
Okay.
tries later.
What they're going to do instead is they are creating an electromagnetic, what they call Partakai grid. It's a time track, okay? They are creating it in between the 3rd and the 4th dimension. All right? This area here, okay, is the tension zone. They call it the repulsion zone. It's where the dimensions magnetically push away from each other. All right, they're going to create an artificial time continuum, an artificial track to get us from here to our next evolutionary step. They're going to do it this way, and it's already started. All right, they have to raise the frequency rate of the planet slowly, because if you do it too fast, you can wipe it out. By 2012, we should be right about here. We come into the dead center of the energy field of this new time track. Instead of going this way, spiraling over here, like we normally would, where we hit our double over here at intersect, that's not going to happen. They're going to have a spiral up this way. In 2017, instead of being down here, we're going to be up here. And we're talking about space and frequency here. Frequencies, okay? Now, from here, 2017, we're going to evolve, spiral over here, and that'll be about 2037. Then we're going to have this track. Here's where we're going to do our 2,000-year evolution. Instead of doing it down here, it's going to be done in this time track here. When it gets to this point again, it's going to enter another acceleration. These little things are accelerations. They're much tighter spirals. Everything moves much faster. Time moves much faster. And we're in one right now. Okay? And it's going to get worse as we get closer to there. Time is going to
Is that why there's a lot of aberrated behavior right now?
Oh, yeah, just wait. I mean, it's going to be more intense as we go along. All right, once we pass through this, go around here, we'll go through another acceleration period and end up in the V4 cycle like we normally would. Okay? You're shaking your head over there. That's okay. You can argue with the Guardians, not me. If there's
Yes, I am. Who's ready to talk to the Guardian?
Well, there's in the next article coming out, there's a way to begin that process.
Nobody's under more mind control than me.
So if you see there the two paths, okay? This is the one we would normally take, and this is the one they're trying to make us take. Now, if we don't take this one, it's not in our best interest. For one, when we hit here, we may vibrate too low to have a smooth transition through the energy field of our double, which will cause certain shifts in the magnetic grid, not a total pole reversal, but just enough to cause chaos here, where we have tidal waves, and we have volcanoes, and we have plate shifting, and that kind of stuff that none of us want to deal with. All right? So, either we're looking at three probable futures right now. We're looking at one probability where we enter the bridge zone and have a smooth transition and another, smooth 2,000 years of development. We're looking at another one here where we vibrate too low and intersect with the energy field of our double, and it creates chaos here and pole shifting. And the third possible future, or probable future, is if we don't make the bridge zone, but we make it to here, yet we vibrate higher. The planet vibrates higher at this point, and it passes through its double with no problem. That means we can get through here without too much problem. We still have a problem that most of us don't realize the extent of it. It's called intruder infestation. All right? Just as there are guardians that are around that will give people information like this, there are intruder forces around that have been messing with us for a long time, for 50 years, and they will continue to do so if we stay in this time track. We get out of their range if we move into this time track. Problem solved instantly. Okay? So
Katie,
this is
who's
really the best
making that decision, Guardians? As to which scenario is going to play out?
Well, the Guardians are attempting to have this scenario play out. And this goes way up. I mean, you're talking about, 15-dimensional level councils and that kind of stuff. There are things going on out there we don't realize. We don't realize how big this universe is and how many collectives of intelligent, sentient beings there are out there.
A lot of meetings.
Yeah. Okay, so basically that's what we're facing. And yes, it's complicated, but let me give you a basic rundown. Now, I want to get something here. This will bring it home a little bit so we understand where we fit into this as little bodies on this planet. Okay? The particle grids. Okay, and I'm going to basically read this to you. Okay. Okay. Particle grids are units of electrotonal energy that emanate from a central cosmic source. They are units of consciousness and energy. Okay? And you have a picture of a source there. Let's say hypothetical source, but it's not hypothetical. It's an actual center out of which everything emerges. All right? These little dots represent particles. Particles work like minute fission fusion generators, creating refraction and replication of energy, providing the cosmos with a continual supply of life force energy and consciousness. All right, I'm giving you a little basic rundown here because I'm going to show you that you're composed of particles, and this is important to the whole planetary procession here. Okay? Particles, little tiny things. These things are so tiny. We haven't identified them yet. We don't have microscopes that can see these things yet. Okay, they're smaller than photons. I think they're smaller than tachyons. They're infinitesimally small units of energy. All right, they group to form strands. All right, they make strands, and then the strands group to form something called a particle grid. It would, if you could see it, it would look something like this, but made out of light. It would look like it was made out of little dots of light. What they're really made out of is electrotonal energy, which is sound light energy. Okay? Particle grids are the electrotonal or electromagnetic templates of electrotonal energy. They're the foundations upon which all matter, antimatter, free matter, and consciousness are built. Everything is composed of these things. We are, our thoughts are, everything is composed of these things. Okay? Particle grids, these things, form the frequency bands, which run through all things. They form the frequency bands that form the dimensions. All right? The higher the dimension, the faster the particle in the grid are moving. So if we're in D3 here, let's say our particles are moving like this. In D4, they'd be moving like this. In D5, like this, all the way up to 15-dimensional scale. Okay? All right. So these are some things you need to know a little bit about to understand the rest of what I'm going to talk about. Okay? Earth and everything on it, including humans, is composed of interwoven particle grids. There's not a space in this room or a space between any atom in your body that is not filled with a particle grid. Okay? They run through everything. They are the smallest units. They are the energy substance of which the universe is composed. All right? Now, to our final statement on these ones. Earth is also composed of a particle grid, okay? It's connected to the universe, and we're connected to it. Earth's particle grid needs to be raised in frequency to make the time continuum shift between 2012 and 2017. Now, you raise the frequency by raising the movement of particles within the grid, and you do that by what they call assembling keylons. And now we'll get into keylons. Okay, I'm going to use a little Amazon demonstration so you can talk with it. As I'm describing this, like, you pass these out here, and just like people to kind of roam around different directions if you want to. And look at the structure there as I'm talking about these things, okay? Look at the little tiny pieces of crystalline all hooked up together, okay? Now, keylons are minute, geometrically shaped crystalline structures made of particle springs. Okay, the full springs of particle, they build together, and they form, and they build following these mathematical formulas that create geometrical shapes, all right? Particle grids draw in more and more units of particle, which build up to form keylons within the particle grid. This is an example of a keylon, but what is a much better example is those things that I'm passing around. These are infinitesimally small crystalline structures, and we are composed of them. The space around us is composed of them. Everything is composed of them. Okay? The cosmos and everything in it is made of a crystalline matrix of keylons on particle grids. So if you picture crystals with light grids running through them, that is what is the basic structure behind all of our tiny little particles. And we all have one. We all own a particle grid. We all own a keylon body. Our form is composed of these crystalline, minute crystalline structures. And this becomes very, very important if we want to evolve and if we want to help our planet to evolve in a positive way. Okay. Okay, they are the minute units of substance within and behind all things. Okay, this crystalline matrix of keylons is called the unified field. All right? It can be detected as an electromagnetic field here. But if we had the ability to see even smaller than we already see it, we would see that this unified field was composed of crystals. You could look at the cosmos as being a multidimensional version of these crystal clusters that I'm passing around to you, because that is what these grids look like. They look like crystals. And crystal carries energy. Okay? It's a very good conductor of energy.
You seem to be underemphasizing chemistry a little bit.
I just want, let me finish, okay, and then you can try to bombard me with scientific questions that I don't know if I can answer. Okay? Our bodies and the planet are linked through this unified field. They're linked to the keylons and the particle grids. We're linked to the space around us. We're linked to each other. We're linked to the chair. We're linked to the rest of the universe. And we're linked to our planet through these crystalline matrices. Okay? If enough people raise the vibrational rate and frequency of their own particle grids, the grids that run right through your bodies and cells and DNA, and you do this by assembling more keylon codes, building more of these into your particle grid, the grid of the Earth will also raise in frequency. This is how we make it into the grid zone. This is how we get rid of the intruder problem. And this is also how we evolve consciously. We become conscious of our evolutionary process. Because in order for us to build these keylons, it implies that our consciousness is going to expand and we're going to start the workings of our genetic code expanding also. Okay? So every person on the planet either helps to raise the Earth's frequency or to pull it down. Because you are a crystalline body attached to a crystalline body of Earth, okay? What runs through you, what frequency runs through you is going to run through the Earth. If you have a whole bunch of people resonating at a very low frequency, it's going to take the frequency of the planet down with it. These grids are interconnected. And if we can start to understand that, we might remember the relationship that we really have with this Earth. It is not just something we're walking around on. It is something we're a living part of. And we're in trouble without it. Okay? And
Katie, it sounds like floating upward in a glass of water being a cork, and as you put more water into the glass, float higher. The cork floats up higher and higher.
yeah. That's a very good analogy. Yes.
Graceful.
You put more kilos in your particle grid and you start doing the cooking. Yes, it gets much more complicated than that as far as matter densities and this kind of thing. Basically, where you have matter particles, okay, you have your dense matter particles, and in between those, the spaces between those, is where particles exist. And if you put more and more particles and their kions in between those dense matter particles, the matter particles become less and less, and they become less dense. And that's how we evolve up through the dimensional scale. Okay, raising frequency, becoming aware of our multidimensional identity. This is something that has to do with every person here. There's so many spiritual things out there that tell you this is the way to God, that's the way to God, what is God, who knows what God is. Half of us are giving up on the whole process and said, forget it, it's too confusing and the old stories don't work for us anymore, okay? Yet, there is an undeniable force that somehow we are connected to. I mean, we believe that, old-fashioned scientists, consciousness is created by the body. Well, excuse me, if that was so, what created the body first? It just when Big Bang happened? I don't think so. There's another theory, and I think I like this theory better. Maybe you'll share that theory with me. Okay? Now, the higher dimensional aspects of our identity are literal, tangible parts of ourselves, just like our arm or our leg. This is composed of particles, okay? This is composed of kilos. If we looked at it with a very, very tiny microscope, we'd see our little crystal body. Well, you know what? We also have aspects of our identity in the higher dimensional fields that are also composed of particles and kilos. They're just as real as these are, but they have less versions of density because they vibrate higher, okay? Okay. The personal kelon structure, meaning that belongs to you with your body and your consciousness, is called the crystal body. We call it that for short, just to make the concept easy, okay? First, we call it crystal because that's what the kelons look like, if you can see them. The crystal body runs through our DNA, our body cells, and our consciousness. Okay, our consciousness is not just this floating ethereal thing that has no form. It has a grid to it. It has a particle grid and it has kelons. Okay? The crystal body extends into the 15th dimension and contains our higher levels of awareness. Each level of our crystal body is made of a specific kelon configurations. The specific kelon configurations called kelon codes. They would be like little groups of those kelons taking specific geometrical shapes, and each dimension would have a different configuration of them. Okay? The higher the dimension, the greater amount of kelons in the particle grid. So if we're focused here, our consciousness is here right now, and our bodies are here. Our bodies actually have less kelons that form our physical bodies. Our mental bodies, if you want to call them that, the portion of our consciousness that is focused here, has a bit more kelons than that. We go to our higher levels of identity, they have even more and more and more of these crystalline structures. And these crystalline structures contain energy, awareness, and consciousness. Okay? Now, as we begin to expand our awareness to include the higher dimensional aspects of identity, more kelon codes and frequency bands begin to assemble in the particle grid of our bodies and the DNA, and eventually they will manifest in the DNA. Right now we have 2 strands. Eventually, once we fully evolve, we'll have 12 strands, because that was the original prototype for this human form. Okay, but I don't get into that too much. All right, this is the natural dynamic of physical evolution and evolution of consciousness through time. They're not 2 separate things. They occur together. Okay? The more kelon codes in our DNA and body, the higher our body's frequency will be. And the higher dimensional fields we'll be able to perceive while we're in our body. We won't have, once we start to evolve, we won't have this division between our dream state and our conscious state, and between our astral state and our physical state. They will become one. We will need less sleep because we will be aware in more than one time-space continuum. It will completely change the orientation of consciousness to the body map, but we're not there yet. This is where we're eventually going to evolve to. They can't make this happen overnight. But we can start to learn about the process and to participate in it. Okay? Last thing I'd like to show you. Okay. Okay. Keylontic science, raising frequency, and personal evolution. Okay. Keylontic science is the science of directing keylons and particles to achieve desired results. Now, ET technology is built on keylontic science. I'm not just talking about bodies and consciousness and all these intangible type things. They have photon condenser generators, for instance, that power their interdimensional ships. These are created using keylontic science, understanding how these crystalline grids work. Okay, so there are physical apparatus that have been created with this science. I've seen it. The keylontic chamber is created using this. They have biocomputers, which are synthetic mind complexes that work through this. And they're one of the things that they use to manipulate us here. All right, so these technologies are tactile as well as just something internal that we can do with ourselves. So I just wanted to give you the idea of the scope of that. The important thing for us to realize first, before we worry about building photon condenser generators, is learning how to use the particle grid that we have within our own body and how we can use that to evolve ourselves, to expand our identity, to expand our consciousness, and to evolve our body. And as we do that, we're going to get the earth out of trouble. Okay? We have to take care of us, and it will take care of her. All right, now.
Smooth truth caretaker.
Yes, more than you know. Okay. Okay, the same dynamics that build photon condenser generators are the dynamics that are also those of personal evolution. Right now, we can help the Earth and ourselves by taking responsibility for personal evolution. Our bodies have a resonance rate. It's called a resonance rate. And this is how the ETs assess us, both the good guys and the not good guys. Okay? It's the reality of the electrotonal particle vibration contained within our particle grids and our kelons. And they call that our resonance rate, where we resonate, where we vibrate at, basically. Okay, if we raise our resonance rate, we also raise the Earth's resonance rate. So if we work on ourselves, we're helping the Earth, period. Okay, and we raise the Earth's frequency. When your resonance rate starts to raise, you are raising the frequency of your body. You are raising the frequency of the matter particles in your body and your consciousness. All right. I'm going to give you a quick little chart down here. I apologize for it not being neat yet. I have it written out here for anybody who wants to look at it later. But I had to scribble it down real fast here because I was making use of my hand tonight. No material. Okay. Now, here we have our dimensional scale, 1 through 15. Okay. The dimensions are broken up into groups of 3. They call one of these the harmonic universe. So there are 5 harmonic universes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay? Now, we're down in here right now in the D3. We're composed of a D1 etheric and molecular structure, a D2 elemental structure, the more complex elements that compose our bodies, and also our emotional bodies are connected to that. Okay, the place that gives us emotion, that's also connected to the D2 frequencies. And D3, which could be considered our mental body, or the part of ourselves that has mental independent sentient thought. All right. There are other aspects of us that we forgot about, but a long time ago we knew about. But we have been taught for many, many, many eons from ETs that manipulated us and the founding of our religions. Our religions were wonderful when they were first given, but they have been twisted and distorted. There's been misinformation provided by beings from the sky at numerous times during our development as a species. Okay. We had this knowledge once upon a time contained right within our cells and our DNA, and it was plugged in, and we just knew it. We don't know it now because that information was plugged out. The kelons that contained that information were taken out of our active DNA strands, but they still exist in our cells. I believe science calls them junk DNA. They're little tiny particles of what look like DNA floating around in there. These are not junk. They are our memories. They are pieces of our kelon codes in our grids that hold our species memory, that hold more aspects of our higher dimensional consciousness, and also the consciousness of our history. Okay? Part of our evolution is getting back to where we were before our codes were altered. All right? What we need to discover is these things we call it the higher self, some people call it soul, some people call it whatever's up there, that part that gives you inspiration. It doesn't matter what name you call it. Some people call it the superconscious mind. Some people don't think it exists, and that just means they haven't tapped into it yet, because once you find it, you know it's there. Okay? All right. In D4, 5, and 6, dimensions 4, 5, and 6. Now remember, these are composed of frequency bands that are composed of Keylons and particles. All right, so these are substance and energy. We're not just talking hypothetical here. Okay, in the bands of 4, 5, and 6, dimensional bands of 4, 5, and 6, that is where the identity level, our level of awareness that we would call our soul resides. The soul has a certain amount of Keylons. It resonates between 37 and 72 Keylons, okay? Right now, we're down here as the incarnate or embodied self. We have, well, for a human, you have to have between 25 and 36 to be in a human form. Anything that would be in lower life forms. They're down here, okay? So, they call it soul integration. When you start plugging in the Keylons from up here into the particle grid down here. And as you do this, as you plug in these little crystalline structures into your particle grid, the awareness of your D4, 5, and 6 self comes in. All right, now this also includes a lot of memory of selves that are walking around at different time-space continuums simultaneously. Time is simultaneous, it's all taking place at once, which is really mind-blowing when you start to analyze what that means. Okay, and I cover some of this, I'm going to be covering some of this in workshops. It's called the Family Tree of Consciousness, where it shows what we're connected to, what our identity is connected to. But for now, it's just enough to understand the levels of our own consciousness that we have and we can access. And we access it by plugging in Keylons and by raising our frequency of our bodies and our particle grids. All right? D4, 5, and 6, where our soul resides. All right? D7, 8, and 9, we have an oversoul. It has even more Keylons that vibrates even faster and contains even more awareness. Okay? And D10, 11, and 12, this we consider the avatar consciousness. And this is a consciousness that has the ability to transmute its body at will. All right. Once you reach Keylon counts for between 109 and 144 Keylons, you will have a level of awareness within your consciousness where you can manifest things out of thin air, where you can de-manifest yourself and remanifest yourself someplace else. These are the masters. You hear about them in our history. Yeah, some of them were in the Oriental things, some were like in Hindu. Yeah, a lot of the Eastern religions have these supposed masters that knew how to do all this weird stuff. And over here in the Western world, we're kind of, yeah, right. You know, because we're not taught anything about this.
Right.
They were taught these principles in spiritual terms, and some of them rather lofty and colorful. But what they were really doing was working on building the Keylons, okay, within their particle grid. And that gave them the knowledge of how to, what matter was about, and how to use it and how to manipulate it. All right. Now, these up here, the human form, its DNA, and this is the 12-strand DNA prototype. Once we evolve back in to that original form, which we are doing, at least those of us who choose to, that is the highest Keylon count that can be held within the genetic strain of the human. After that point, it transmutes. It basically turns into a ball of light, okay? And we transmute out of the 15-dimensional matrix. We're no longer evolving through those dimensions. We go into a bigger reality field, and time doesn't apply in that reality field. Now, I don't have the diagrams to get into that right now because I figured it would be too much for one night. But this goes into a perpetual motion universe that has a very set structure to it. And there's a lot of freedom that takes place within that structure, but there is a structure and there is an order. All right? After we evolve through plugging in all these Keylons, getting up to the point where we have our avatar consciousness, and believe me, once you're an avatar, this stuff is easy. This is kindergarten stuff. I'm not there yet, so I still struggle with it. You know, there's no way I could invent this material, so obviously it came from someplace. You know, I deserve a pat on the back if I made all this up myself. But anyway, this is what we're working on. There are things that we can do. Once we understand we have a crystal body, once we understand that there's this process we can become involved with, we become consciously involved in the process. It's not just happening to us. And we start to become aware of the parts of ourselves and the parts of our energy fields that we are blind to right now. And it's because we are blind that the intruder visitors can mess with us, because they see our fields, they know how to manipulate them. If we learn about the energy fields within, around our body, and we learn about the rest of the levels of our consciousness and how to use them, they cannot manipulate us anymore. The only reason they can manipulate us is because we're walking around like this, and they're not. We have the ability to evolve way beyond what the visitors are doing, especially the intruder visitors.
What levels are they manifesting? And do you ever soul level?
Which ones?
The intruders? Yeah.
They're coming in right in through here. They were actually, the Zeta were actually from D3 in another time-space continuum. They were like us, biological beings, but they've managed to transmute, they have helons up into this range where they can play games between dimensional ranges. They can manifest here, they can manifest up there. Okay?
And the level of avatar is what?
They call it Rishi. Yeah, that was just the term. They said they're using this term because at least it's somewhere in our English. You know what I mean? It's like honored someplace. They don't really use terms like that at all, but they're trying to plug in what has been taught in our traditions, you know, with words that, you know, that we might be somewhat familiar with. So that's what they call them. We have these levels of self. And to me, that was the most priceless piece of information that the Guardians gave to me. Because once you know what's there, it's first like, well, how do I find it? It is a process. And it's not a fast or overnight process. But you start to become aware of it if you start to work with the process. A lot of people sit there and think, oh, you know, we're just limited to our physical bodies. Well, if you want to believe that, fine, you will be. But if you want to find out what your physical body is capable of and what your consciousness is capable of, start looking beyond what you see in the mirror. You start to realize the reality of your being as an energy system. And you will find amazing things. Through the Guardians training, I've gotten to the point where most times I can pull myself out of body at will. Sometimes I can stay conscious in my body and go in the astral. That's a neat trick. That takes a while to learn how to do that. Okay. Sometimes I can split my consciousness and have three of me in the same room looking at different perspectives. That's another one that takes a lot of energy. It makes you very mentally tired. You can't do it if your body's tired or if you're run down. But these are the things. I've seen them. I've experienced some of them. I know it's real. And that means so much to me. Because so many people here don't know that. And if they could, they'd find out what freedom is. Once you learn what you can do with your energy systems and your consciousness, once you learn to expand the concept of what's real, and start to really see what's real. I mean, we think these solid objects are real, when actually what they are is slow-moving light. It moves slower than what our consciousness perceives, okay? Matter is not solid. Most scientists know that if they look under the electron microscopes where they can see all the movement and stuff happening, they're getting the idea that it's not solid. This is another part of the training course that goes along with learning this level of information. We learn the difference between reality and illusion, and then we start to realize we've been running around an illusion and calling it reality for a very long time. And we've been doing that because we've been tricked. We were tricked a long time ago by ETs who were more evolved than we are, but not super evolved to the point where they knew better. They didn't want us to have that level of knowledge because we couldn't be played with anymore. And some of them would actually like the territory of the earth for their own. There are various groups out there. But some of the negative ones, they have different agendas for the planet. Okay? We've been played, there's a history, there's a whole history to the human species that we don't know about yet. Okay? The Guardians and some of the other intruder ETs know about our history. Okay? We didn't come out of the apes. They came out of us. And we came out of somewhere else. And that history was, some of that was shared with me by the Guardians. I don't have time to go into it today because that's a long one too. But reality is so much bigger than what we're taught to see here. And if I can somehow convey my enthusiasm, the freedom I have found in consciousness, in understanding some of these things, then it's worth it, even if only one or two people even believe me. You know, a lot of people like to argue with me because your ideas are different than mine. That's okay. I just look at it this way. Do I want to accept ideas that are going to limit me or that are going to expand me?